I'm sorry I can't be with you today to describe these three excavations we've carried out recently on 3 Hillforts in southwest Wales, but I hope this short presentation just gives you a flavour of what we've achieved on those particular sites. They are quite different sites in their own way, but also similar, and so I'm just going to go straight into them and just describe what we did and quickly run through the results. So the first one we did was at Portherail. This is a promontory fort, a coastal promontory fort near St David's in Pembrokeshire, and it's suffering from quite severe erosion. And this photograph provided by the Royal Commission's part of the Cherish project shows a rather precarious positioning of our excavation trenches in 2019. It actually feels a lot safer when you're on site. It appears in these photographs. And this shows the entrance passageway to the fort being excavated, which I'll say a bit more about in a second. So the fort itself, as I mentioned, is eroding quite badly, and virtually the whole of the interior has now disappeared. It's that rather gaping hole you see there in the centre of the fort, and only a small promontory of the interior survives. The entrance through the inner bank is still surviving there, but through the outer banks it's now gone. So we were quite keen to excavate here. In fact, we have done. In the 1990s, we excavated a trench along that surviving bit of the promontory. And this is some of the slides of that excavation. You see here the close to the edge, how the eroding edge of the promontory is slowly disappearing. And what we had is a whole classic series of what you expect on Iron Age Hillforts, roundhouse gullies, pits and post holes and so forth, evidence of craft working in the form of metal working, bronze working, some iron working and so forth. And the dates we had for radiocarbon dates indicate perhaps that the fort started its life in about the year 800 and actually went through the Roman period with Roman artifacts associated with structures, including a stone-built roundhouse. Since the 1990s, this bottom right photograph you see there, we've lost about 1 metre along that edge, we calculate, since the mid-1990s. So the site is actively eroding. In fact, that face grass-covered slope there is now much more active. So we returned in 2019 with the idea of continuing to excavate the site, trying to get as much information from this particular site as we could do. And 2019, we concentrated on the entrance passageway through the inner rampart. You see a very big stone-lined passageway, better with these massive boulders, and of 2 quite clear phases, with a wall being inserted to narrow the passageway down at some time during its lifetime, and with 2 massive post holes built in that narrowed passageway. Dating evidence was pretty scant, but we did have quite a bit of Roman pottery in the backfill of this entrance passageway. And that's just a plan showing that entrance passageway. So there's a passageway coming through there, 2 large post holes in the narrowed passageway, and leading into the centre of the fort, which is now gone over here. And this is the 1990s excavation trench showing the stone-built roundhouse, which we just did a bit of excavation, just caught the edge of it in the 1990s. In 2021, we returned to the site and continued the excavation, but mostly focusing upon the interior, a particular roundhouse on the north side of the entrance, which was a stone-built roundhouse, which I'll show you some photographs of that now. Interestingly, a very, very large workstone threshold, which you see there in the foreground, a very peculiar stone, and beyond it, almost a pavement made of large slabs, including several pieces of broken quern stone. Again, the type probably of a minor British date rather than Iron Age. And this particular roundhouse does seem to have been using or reusing what would have been a rear revetment wall in the rampart. It was then refashioned into a roundhouse or some sort of structure. It's not quite round, it's more D-shaped than round. And the one side of the house, which you see that blue fencing, is protecting the site from the workers from the cliff edge. And so a big chunk of this roundhouse actually has gone over the edge already and has been lost. And at Portherail, we hope to be able to return to the site, or we will return to the site this springtime to complete the excavation, the final season of excavations. And we hope to excavate the whole of that roundhouse, which we first identified in the 1990s, to take it all out away before we actually get to the point where the site becomes too dangerous to work on as erosion continues. The second site I'd like to talk about is Pendingus Hilford, which we did some excavation there last autumn. This is an extremely well-known site above Aberystwyth in Ceredigion. It was excavated, or partly excavated, or bits of it excavated in the 1930s by Ford. Unfortunately, there was no real definite data evidence obtained then, apart from which only survives a sherd of Malvernian ware pottery. He excavated the south entrance, which you see there, which would reopen our trenches, the north entrance, and other bits as well of the site. And really, we were keen to do some work in the site for several reasons. One was trying to get some dating evidence from this very complex site, but also trying to get a longer term project going to try and manage the site better. It is suffering quite severely from encroaching vegetation. As you see, there's bracken here, the scrub beginning to take hold on various bits of the rampart. And it is also a local nature reserve on account of its acid grassland, and that's slowly disappearing as the bracken and gorse encroach upon it. So we had various strands to this particular project. So we concentrate on the south entrance, which Ford excavated in the 1930s, but not published until 1963. And its plans still survive in the Royal Commission with photographs and so forth. And it's quite well, on the face of it, quite a simple entrance according to the plans, but one suspects that actually it's far, far more complex than actually Ford accounted for. And this is one of his photographs here. You see quite a very well formed entrance, a big stone rampart, or stone-faced rampart. And you notice here the two small boys sitting in what seem to be post holes built into the revetment walls. And one of the things we're keen to do was actually re-excavate this entrance to try and establish some dating evidence, but also to get some better plans and drawings and so forth. But when we came down to it, we found that this photograph was just a snapshot in time. And in fact, the workers that Ford employed continued to dig on the site, removing those revetment walls and digging down quite deeply into the entrance. So we actually didn't continue working in the entrance area itself. So this drone photograph shows the entrance to the left-hand side, which Ford excavated. And we initially had a small trench out here, which is on a house platform, which we thought was one that Ford had excavated in the 30s. He did excavate several, he said in his reports, but in fact it wasn't. It was one that was untouched by him. And it's quite complex archaeology there. And then we linked then that trench to the entrance over here and came across another house platform, which wasn't visible on the surface. So you see the view here looking from the entrance, which this edge here is Ford's excavation edge, looking across the platform now which we discovered, and then the upper platform over there. And we were expecting the bedrock just to continue straight across, but obviously that's not the case. And there were quite complex archaeology on these platforms. You can see here a drain, various post holes, gullies, and so forth. Interestingly, this platform seems to have been cut by a very large terrace across here. And some of the features are quite dramatic in the way they've been constructed. This substantial post hole carved quite neatly into the hard bedrock, as you see here. And even some finds, which, as you all know, are pretty unusual on these Iron Age Hillforts. And Darfur did record having quite a few artifacts from the site, but so unfortunately there's only one sherd of pottery which survives and got down to the present day. But these are just 3 of the artifacts we had. This is about a sum total essentially, but including a very nice, on the right hand side, amber bead. And we are hoping to return to the site this year, this time looking at the north entrance to the fort, and again re-excavating some of Ford's trenches, but his excavation in the 1930s wasn't quite so extensive on the north entrance, so we can get some good dating evidence from what is quite a complex stratigraphic sequence. And finally, just at Caer, Blaen, Minog, this is North Komaldensha, on one of the best Iron Age promontory forts in the county, in fact in southwest Wales. The fort itself is in those trees you see in the middle distance, and this just shows our excavation trenches we dug here in the year 2020 under quite strict social distancing rules. We managed to get in there between the various lockdowns, but we had quite limited number of trenches and just a few volunteers on site. But we were able to achieve quite a lot in that quite small space of time. The fort itself is very spectacular. It's a triple ramparted fort, 3 massive banks and ditches protecting the easy approachable side. But unusually for these promontory forts, the inner rampart does compose a complete circuit around the promontory. So it's slightly more unusual than many of the promontory forts. And we had carried a geophysical survey of this site in 2019, I think it was, not 2020 as it says there. The interior, you see there, shows several what we take to be roundhouses, but externally there is rather interesting, very high readings, and those correspond with low earthwork mounds in the field outside the fort, and also what seems to be, we were interpreting as a ring ditch, a possible burial ring ditch with a central grave. We're quite keen to do some work here because it was a big drain had been dug through that field several years ago, clipping some of these burnt mounds, partly taking them away. So we're concerned actually there's going to be some more damage and erosion occurring. So we want to try and characterise what we had. And this is just a contour survey of the site showing the trenches we dug across there. You can make out the earthwork showing by those mounds by the sort of wiggly contours. And really just a quick photograph of what we found. It was a classic burnt mound, or in fact burnt mounds, which gave very high geophysical readings. Not a great deal of them survived, but you can see there the mound rising up at the far end of the trench. In the foreground, you can see a pit or a trough filled with burnt stone and burnt material. And you probably can't make it out, but there is a circular ditch coming round, which we interpret as some sort of structural ditch. So what we seem to have here is a burnt mound with a circular structure, with a central burnt stone filled trough. And one wonders what is going on here just outside the Hillfort, particularly when you see the radiocarbon dates, which are early Bronze Age, which perhaps no surprises for burnt mounds. But as I said, you do wonder what inhabitants of the Hillfort thought these very large mounds outside the fort actually were. And we only speculate, but I wonder whether they actually were, or they thought they were, burial mounds. So it's becoming increasingly recognised now. You have got these Bronze Age burial mounds, both inside and outside forts, which seem to have been left untouched by the builders of the forts. So one wonders whether actually these mounds are considered to be of some ritual or ceremonial significance, and they just left them there, didn't flatten them in the Iron Age. So that's it. That's a very rapid run through 3 sites And I would like to thank all the volunteers who worked on these excavations. Without them, they wouldn't be possible. And as I said earlier, we are returning to two of these sites this year. We're going back to Portherail starting on the 6th of June this year, and we hope to be at Pendingus in September this year. So if you are around, please visit or even volunteer on these sites. So thank you very much for that, and I hope that's a very quick resume of 3 very, very interesting excavations. Thank you very much.